What's up, Penn State fans? It is the April 29th edition of BWI Live, the final BWI Wednesday Live of April. Hard to believe Penn State spring practice is already over, as is the fourth month of 2026, but that's okay. We're going to go out in style. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickel. We have news and notes to get to on today's show. A stock report. Who helped themselves in our minds during spring practice and who maybe has more work to do than expected coming out of Matt Campbell's first spring in State College. We're going to get to that. We'll do a little bit of NFL draft recap at the end of the show, and we'll see what questions you have in the chat as we get through this edition of BWI Live. T. Frank, it is the penultimate day of April. Penn State is done with spring practice. Its coaches are about to hit the road in bulk recruiting until May 23rd when the spring evaluation period ends. So recruiting is certainly going to come into focus. And if you go over to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, Ryan Snyder has wound some people up with the latest on the recruiting front with the quarterback position. So you can go check that out at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Just $1 to join over there. But T. Frank, just want to get your 50,000 foot view before we get into some news and notes here from spring practice. We talked throughout the February and early March portion of these shows, both here with you and you with the guys, about we were going to learn what a spring under Matt Campbell would be like, and that his plans at Iowa State were at times different year to year, and that meant that we might not know exactly what we were going to get from him during his first spring at State College at Penn State. So your 50,000 foot view summary of spring practice number 1 under Matt Campbell is what?
I was appreciative of the access. So how it's worked before is we get 10 minutes once a week under James Franklin for every practice week that they have during spring and during fall and during the regular season. And that practice window was, after a certain point, relatively unfruitful once they changed some certain things up. Now, let me be clear. I was able to get some understanding from what was going on, but it's not like anything I could report of like, hey, they're going to be running flood into the boundary. Like it's inappropriate of me to be telling everyone what I see from the passing concepts they're working on in practice. So there are things that you can glean, but things that you shouldn't be reporting. Now, during this spring, we got to see every other week a full practice. And again, not reporting on the concepts we're seeing, not reporting on some of the specific actions, but I got a better sense of what they're trying to build on both sides of the ball. And I appreciate that. And you got a sense of the talent on the roster to a certain degree. The problem is it's not just about trying to evaluate what you're seeing. It's trying to evaluate everything all at once and not being able to be everywhere while also trying to get photos for the thumbnails here on YouTube. So there is just an overwhelm of information, which is what we talked about during the spring of there's going to be a lot of stuff I miss during the spring football. So those 3 opportunities to view the defense, the offense, I did not view the special teams. I will not be a head coach and give you coach speak here. I don't value it the same way because I just can't. I don't have the brain space for it. But I feel like we got a good sense of what they're trying to build, the basic foundation fundamentals of what they're doing. And I think that was helpful for us. I think that informs a good conversation about Penn State football for the next couple of months before we get to fall. And we'll see what access is like there. I don't know that we're going to get access at a certain point. We won't have it. And that is also, I think, to a certain point, a relief. Because then it's not once again, it's just one of those things that's during the week that there's just a lot of pressure around to get the most information available when it is the most sensitive information. You have to be the most careful about what you're saying and when you're saying it and where you're saying it. And so just not having that might also be good, just for my own mental health. So It was great. I really enjoyed the way spring functioned this year.
Yeah, you're talking about practice access in the fall. Of course, we'll continue to hear from Matt Campbell and his players in the fall. But yeah, the practice part to be determined. But no, you're right. The access was great. We appreciate Matt Campbell and his staff for that. And just to me, from what we learned about this team, I think that the defense, even though it's new to everyone and there's a new defensive coordinator, had a lot more of the bodies you would expect to play this year available outside of Tony Rojas, obviously outside of Alex Tash or some other guys who were limited. But the offense, I think we got a good sense of what Taylor Mauser wants to do, and we can figure, based on what he did with Rocco, Becht, Carson Hansen, Ben Brahmer, the top receivers that came from Iowa State. We know what they want to do, but there were a lot of guys who were out on that side of the ball. And Matt Campbell speaking a week ago today, or tomorrow, a week from yesterday, week from tomorrow, we'll get there, on the Penn State coaches show, said that about a third of the roster was in some way limited and or out this spring. And it felt to me that a good chunk of those, mostly recovery from needed offseason work, was on the offense. So I think during the summer and the fall, we will learn a little bit more heading into the season about what the offense is actually going to look like with the guys who are going to be actually running it. I think we got a sense of what it wants to look like, regardless of who is on the field. But certainly, when you're talking about a spring where Rocco Becht was limited to 7-on-7 work and wasn't even able to do that at the start of spring, we know that the top two receivers, Chase Soule and Brett Singleton, I hope I got that right for Fitz. We're not. I did not. Okay, very good. I'm just going to continue to pass that off to you then. We're not able to do anything. I know you will, T. Frank. Thank you. Those guys obviously limited. Anthony Donko, not available for spring. So I just think we'll get a better sense of what that wants to look like with the guys they want running it on the first team anyway, come summer camp. But it was a good spring for Penn State. I think most importantly, T. Frank, we only had one. I think Mason Robinson was the only new injury story we had this spring outside, and Tyshawn Huff as well.
Yeah.
But certainly Penn State was not in the position, no team ever is, but this one in particular was in no position to have a rash of new issues pop up this spring. And as far as we can tell, and from what we've heard, that has not been the case.
I'll throw in Max Granville as well, but he was kind of nicked up throughout spring practice. So it wasn't like it was a thing where we saw him and then he was gone. It was more that he was consistently, held back from spring practice, which wasn't something that happened during spring practice from what he was talking about. And Brad says this in the chat, and this is actually something I've been thinking about a lot lately, going to just the nature of how you cover football. So, Brad says, don't worry, T. Frank, we probably wouldn't understand what you're saying anyway when I'm talking about things that I probably shouldn't be talking about from practice and the specifics of plays and things like that. And here's the thing is I struggle with this myself of the things that I find interesting are not the who's good, right? So if we come from practice, watching the blue-white practice and say who had a good day, who stood out, who's good at football from Saturday, to me that is missing the point. The point is who's being put in position and what position are they being put into, because then that dictates whether or not they should have a good day, right? So there's some things that I saw in practice in the inside zone or the inside run fits from Saturday where they are running an offensive scheme into a defensive scheme that sucks. You would not run outside zone into the look that they were getting. But they're doing that because they want to stress those players, and then who succeeds or fails in that and who maybe rises above the situation to make a play. And predictably, the defensive line wrecked the offensive play. And so, do I say Malachi Goodman had a bad day? Or was he just not far and away better in that situation as to overcome the situation he was put in? And so, I tend to zag all the time. And I think some people don't care about what I have to say because it's not the more understandable nutshell of Koby Howard good, somebody else bad. And we're trying to fix that today with our stock up, stock down. Literally put the clamps on me, so I have to say who good, who bad. And that's what we're doing today on the show.
Right. Well, let's get into some news and notes first. A new top 25 as spring practice wraps up came out this week. USA Today moved Penn State up from number 17 to number 16. Don't have to spend a lot of time on this. I think some folks got a little sick of hearing about it when we talked about it in the way too early top 25s. But biggest takeaway for me, T. Frank, is that Penn State this spring in the media top 25s I've seen are moving up, not down, following spring practice, which at this point is about all you can ask for.
Yeah, they've had a generally good spring and nothing that haven't been any season-ending injuries that would derail the season so far. Good news so far.
And Rocco Becht being ahead of schedule per Matt Campbell does not hurt matters either in this regard. Yeah. Other news and notes the 2027 early mock drafts are coming out. Not a whole lot of Penn State flavor in those. Some people reacting a certain way to that. I think, to me, T. Frank, it's not a huge deal. I think that when you look at this Penn State roster at the moment, there are some guys, when you look back at last year's early mock drafts, I went back and looked, I think I mentioned this last week, but I went back and looked at the story I did before the 2025 NFL draft, which was which Penn State players on this roster playing in the 2025 season could be first-round picks. And I got to Van Goawani in the wild card section after I rattled off a bunch of other guys. So it's a good reminder of that. Just because guys aren't on those lists now doesn't mean they won't be by the time the draft rolls around, and certainly vice versa. But I will say this, Marcus Neal is the one guy getting some attention. He'd have to leave school early to enter the draft, but he's getting some attention. Seen a little bit of Ben Brahmer being mentioned.
I don't know about that. So I get that here's the problem. Marcus Neal is getting attention because he's got an award and because he's got tackles. That is good. That does not translate to the NFL draft. You know, we've seen Heisman candidates go in the 4th round or whatever with their quarterback that the NFL doesn't think can throw the football. Right. What is he projecting as? Box safety is not a first-round pick. Like, just from a value standpoint. Look at Zakee Wheatley. We're going to get to this later, but, like, that's not a first-round pick. Zakee Wheatley, the NFL saw him as a 5th-round box safety. They didn't see him as a split-field safety. Like, he went to the Carolina Panthers. So Marcus Neal can't be a box linebacker safety hybrid and be a first-round pick unless he runs a 4-3-2. And I don't think he's going to do that. So then it becomes like, again, what are the traits? What are the positions that are valuable? And I actually did this exercise with Chris Buchanani on a different YouTube channel over on Landon's channel. And we're not talking about Chase Soul because he hasn't won any awards, but from an athletic standpoint, this dude's a first-round pick. Now, does he put it all together? Does he fix the drop issues? Does he play with consistency? I understand the ifs there, but if we're talking about upside and talent, it's Anthony Donko and Chase Soul. Value positions in the NFL draft with the size and athletic measurables that the NFL will love. And so this is the no nuance, lack of context with we just look off stats and numbers and awards to build our list of guys and not the actual, like, what are the scouting parameters? Because nobody's done that work yet. Like, that's the reasonable part, by the way, that nobody's done that work, but it's also the flaw in the way too early conversation. It's just like guys we know with awards and PFF grades that we like. So, end of rant.
I got T. Frank rolling 12 minutes into this edition of BWI Live. That means you're in for a good show, folks, if you haven't figured that out yet. So
we have a new outro for those if I get stuck. So just head on swivel, Greg. I might be firing that at some point.
All right, good to know. I appreciate that. All right, let's get into the title topic of today's show. It's the stock up, stock down report following Penn State spring practice. Like we said earlier, Penn State 15 practices in the books. It's time for recruiting. But for us, T. Frank, it's time to take a look at some stock up, stock down, guys. Let's start with, you want to start positive or negative? Your call.
Let's start with the positives because there's a bunch of them. So I think we should go through those. And then we also basically have the same list of stock down. So we can kind of just run through that at the end. Let's start with stock up.
Let's start with stock up. Let's be positive on the penultimate day of April. All right, there we go. I knew we had a graphic for that somewhere. I just was not able to find it, and you found it for me. Well done. All right, stock up for you, number one. Well, we actually both have a quarterback on our list, so let's start there, and then I'll start playing with the numbers and count us down. But you go with Rocco Becht. I go with Connor Berry. I'm going to let you start with Rocco Becht. You have him on this list. Obviously, I think you talked about it with Nate yesterday, or we have talked about it at some point on this show. Limited to some degree throughout spring practice, progressed back to a point following a sprained AC joint in his throwing shoulder, his right shoulder, a labrum surgery to repair a torn labrum on his non-throwing shoulder. Started throwing the football again in February, was able to do some individual work at the start of spring drills in late March, progressed to being able to do 7-on-7 work at the blue-white practice. Is that why he's on your stock up list?
Yeah, because he was able to practice, and Matt Campbell, I really want to emphasize this. We cannot gloss over the fact that they didn't think they were going to have him for spring football, the starting quarterback. And then suddenly the backup quarterback, but they were not going to have their starting quarterback to call the offense and get everyone used to his voice, his cadence, literally the snap count. They were not going to have that. And then they did. And I understand, we put a premium on the combative periods of 7-on-7, 11-on-11. But there's a lot of work that goes into route timing, consistency in the handoffs with the running backs and the run game, and he could do all of that stuff. He could work in quasi-positional drills, like when they're throwing routes on air or when they're doing those center exchanges. All those little details He was able to do all of that. The only thing he couldn't do was throw in competitive periods, which is, to me, less about like working on the details, and that's more of like, do we think Rocco Becht is good at football? And I think they already think that, so that's not necessary.
Yeah.
And if they didn't get any of that, Matt Campbell said yesterday, or on Saturday, I was going to be really nervous, but they did get all of that work from Rocco Becht. So I think like you can only see that as like the number one stock up for the offense, and maybe the team to have their starting quarterback out there this year when they didn't expect that. Even if it wasn't for the full spring, they got him through, 8 practices or something like that, which is massive.
Yeah, I was glad Matt Campbell admitted that after the blue-white practice back on Saturday when he said he would have been nervous. You said it exactly if Rocco Becht wasn't able to at least do that, and with good reason. I have Connor Berry on my stock up list mostly because he seemingly came from a D3 transition to the D1 level, and I'm sure had some more hiccups than we're aware of, but certainly was able to, at the very least, bare minimum, get some of the things done this team needed to get done on offense outside of the quarterback position. So, without Alex Mansky, you also had 2 freshmen that were learning the ropes for the very first time. He's at least been through a few spring practices. So for Connor Berry to be able to do that, I thought was good. It doesn't change my opinion that, and this is not a shot at Connor Berry. It's the reality, like we talked about last year when Drew Allar got hurt. If you lose your starting quarterback, you are probably in trouble. Okay, it's just as simple as that. But Connor Berry, like we saw on Saturday, was able to direct the offense. I know they handed off a ton because of the weather, maybe some because of him, but whatever it might be, he didn't have a lot of chances to throw. When he did, it was okay. It wasn't great. It was probably about what you would expect. But I guess looking at it going into the spring and knowing that Alex Mansky wasn't going to be there, you were, I think, at least curious whether or not this would set the offense back in terms of its progress of putting things in, preparing guys.
It could have been a total disaster, right? Like if Connor Berry isn't ready and you've got 2 freshmen and that's it, like that, and then Jack Lambert as well, right? So you'd have 4 quarterbacks, and that would be that'd be the 5-alarm fire. That would be the problem you would have, that the offense just did not get good work in the spring because the quarterbacks could not execute the offense, and that doesn't give the defense good work, and probably gives them a false sense of security too. Right. So yeah, it was a good situation to have them back for sure.
Yeah. So those 2 guys, easy picks for our list. Let's get to, we'll just go in reverse order today. Why not? Let's get to number 2.
Yep. Number 2.
All right, T. Frank, we have a bunch of guys on this list, so we'll rattle off our best ofs at the end. But who you got next on this list?
Let's go with our positional crossovers. I'm going to go with Quinton Martin because I think that I said at the beginning of camp, and I did not get to see it until the end of camp, like the running back room needed to prove something to me because there were guys that, yes, they have talent, but there was developmental steps they had to take. And the whole red herring of how much does Quinton Martin weigh on the roster, like what was his actual input weight for everyone to see, it was a little bit of an alarm, like an eyebrow raise thing, and then everything they said about him was good. Like it was glowing, and it was the fact that he's doing all the right things. And then during the practice, we got to see it of him actually running through guys and generating yards after contact, which was something he was willing to try and do. Now, again, this is against the second team defense, if you're watching this on the YouTube channel. So just like take some of these things, again, with the context that's given. But he did them. Last year, he did not do them at this point in time. So I think that the physical development of Quinton Martin, that was the biggest thing for me. And then for James Peoples, it was also for me to get to know him a little bit better. But for Martin, like it was very important that he did these things and took these steps. And we got to see at the end of the 15th practice, while he's trying to get bigger and stronger throughout the offseason, he put that stuff on, air quotes, film. We all got to see him do those things. So I thought that was really good. That was my biggest stock up, probably outside the Rocco Becht being more important. Like the biggest stock up for me, the biggest win was Quinton Martin being who they said he was throughout spring practice.
Yeah, I went with James Peoples. I liked, obviously, what I saw during the blue-white practice from him, but also during the 2 previously mentioned times we were able to see Penn State practice in action. He just looks the part of a Big Ten running back that should not really come as a surprise, considering he comes from Ohio State. But like Quinton Martin, to the point you were making, T. Frank, he's a guy that came to Penn State as a former 4-star recruit who, at least to this point in his college career, maybe hasn't had the stats or the snaps or whatever to back up that ranking. And he came to Penn State looking for a fresh start and hoping to find that form, much like Quinton Martin got the chance to play in the Pinstripe Bowl and was hoping to build off of that. So I thought he had a good spring. I was impressed by what he was able to do and the shiftiness he had during the blue-white practice. And we continue to think that it's pretty simple when you look at this Penn State running backs room. It's going to start with Carson Hansen, but Peoples and Martin are going to have a role. Obviously, you've heard Sean talk about that. You've talked about that. Nate's talked about it. We'll talk about it one more time. This is going to be after 4 years of two guys primarily splitting every single carry. It's going to be a little bit different. You're going to have one guy at the top, but it does not feel to me, at least off the cuff, that he's going to have such a hammer hold on the job that the other two guys are only going to get mop-up work. So they're going to mix and match when guys' strengths are at their best. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think there can be roles in there as well. And as much as like we have been trying to say Quinton Martin is a running back, stop talking about him like he's a slot receiver. That once he is a running back, then the value of him as a receiver does show up. So you can have him as a third down back. You can put him in certain packages. You can do 21 personnel with 2 running backs in the backfield. So you can get those guys in different roles. And I don't think they've been working on that just yet. They've just been working on, hey, take the lead back, carry in the offense, and like we'll split it 3 ways during training camp or however much they want Carson Hansen to get work, who might not need to get as much work. I think this has been a good time for them to show like they can be lead back material, and then we can figure out what their roles are later so that you don't feel like you need to feed Carson Hansen 400 carries this year. Nate and I were actually talking about this yesterday of like what they did last year at Iowa State and like just replicating that to the new situation, which is something I'm guilty of doing all the time. And I have to remind myself that there are other ways to do stuff, and they don't have to do it exactly how they did it last year. You can have some variance, and we've seen over the time Matt Campbell has split up the carries with his running backs differently depending on who's worthy of getting those carries. And I do believe that this staff is going to give carries to those people who are worthy and not make a decision, and then from there it is a static situation, if you catch my meaning.
Yes, I certainly do. So, yeah, I think that Carson Hansen had a good spring as well. Don't want to overlook him as a guy that can be part of this conversation. All 3 of them certainly will make an impact on the Penn State offense this year under first-year coordinator Taylor Mauser. All right, let's get to, well, we're going to call it number 1. I don't know if it's number 1, but we're going to call it number 1.
Number 1.
For the record, I didn't start hitting the buttons at the right time. So we started with the quarterbacks who T. Frank and I had at the top of our list, and now we're going backwards. But there was no way to redo the graphics to get them to go in reverse. So here we are. My pick here is Josiah Zayas, the Penn State safety, who, and I think, and this will bleed into the stock down conversation then, but we know what Marcus Neal is. You talked about his game a little bit earlier. I'm not sure coming out of spring ball, and I'm not saying it's going to be Josiah Zayas, but he did have a nice spring game, albeit against the non-first team offense. But I don't know if I have a good sense yet of what the plan is at that other safety spot when they're in, unless it's Zion Tracy, because we heard a lot about Marcus Neal, but you look at the rest of this safeties room, and who did we hear the most about? It was Zayas, a freshman who came in and obviously, he was listed as a cornerback on the roster originally. They like him more at safety because he's 212 pounds already, and I don't think he's getting any thinner, T. Frank. So it was going to be tough for him to hold up at cornerback at that weight. But you look at the rest of this safety depth chart, and we know Jeremiah Cooper, Jamison Patton, 2 guys who were kind of in and out during spring ball, will be a part of the conversation. We didn't hear their names much this spring, partially because they weren't on the field all that much. But that might answer the question long term, probably will. But in terms of some of the other guys who had a chance to step up, it seems like Zayas took the best advantage of the extra reps given to him.
Yeah, and I'm just hitting the high notes. Like, we're just playing Freebird here. I'm going with Koby Howard. He was the guy I heard the guy. I'm going to do a composite here. He's the guy I heard the most about, tied with another player, but also the guy I saw the most productivity out of, and the most of, like, I actually saw it in person. And it's I think an important development for Penn State fans because they like Koby Howard, but also for Penn State that they have more options in the receiving room. Not that you need to throw the ball to the receivers more in this offense because they're going to play 12 personnel. They're going to be a run-heavy offense with heavy personnel, but you don't have to rely on Brett Eskildson and Chase Soule solely as they did previously at Iowa State. I think they've got more guys, and the guy at the top of that competition from the spring. Like, there were 3 guys vying for that spot of who's going to be the player that is inserting themselves into the conversation to play with that top 3. And the guy that came out on top so far is Koby Howard. And that is a big thing for the receiver room, for Penn State's developmental narratives at receiver, and the other 2 are going to have a bigger impact on the actual perception of Penn State receivers because they're going to get more targets. But Koby Howard is going to, like, he's on the right path to forcing himself into the conversation, and that was a big thing for spring. And so even though I think there's another player that's much more important to the starting unit, Koby Howard is the biggest story that actually now has something behind it, as opposed to before it felt a little bit like the whole Koby Howard narrative, even though I stand by what I said yesterday, that there's no amount of production he can have other than being the team's number 1 receiver that would merit the amount we've talked about him. The amount of times we've asked about him, the amount of times that we've asked about him in the chat, the more of the time that his name has come up on this show. And yet it is substantive. Like, it is a substantive conversation now. So I think that's good for Penn State.
It's not a bad thing, that's for sure, and we'll see how he continues to progress. Consistency, I think. Talking to Rocco Becht afterwards, I got the sense he was asking about a number of young receivers, Zay Robinson being one of them, Koby Howard being one of them. Help me out here. Who am I forgetting? The other one who
Karon Brookins.
Yes, Karon Brookins. Thank you. He was asked kind of about all 3 of those guys and just that room in general. And the sense I got was consistency. It's not about the flashes that are good. It's about limiting the ones that are bad, and then B, having more of those good flashes for that entire group. So that's not an unfamiliar conversation, Frank, for Penn State fans at this point. I think we've all heard, seen, realized what Penn State receivers went through the last couple of years, and consistency has usually been at top of the list when it comes to why those rooms haven't been as good as they could be. Obviously, talent being another one.
Yeah.
But so good for Koby Howard. We'll just wrap up here with some rapid fire stock up. Nate Tiyce was on my list, the Penn State punter transfer from somewhere down south that escapes me at the moment, Mississippi State. He had a great blue-white game. Did a little bit of rugby punting, did a little bit of traditional punting, and he did a bang-up job in the rain. So he caught my eye as a guy that will obviously battle with freshman Lucas Tembrock when he gets to campus later this summer. And that is going to be – I know it's not one that people like to talk about unless you're Fitz, of course, but it's one that can change games, as we all know.
Yeah.
And that battle is going to be very interesting to see unfold over the course of the summer.
Yeah, I thought we were doing more, so I put Malachi Goodman on the list. You were right to cap it at 3, but Malachi Goodman.
I got some more. I can rip some off here. We're good.
Yeah, but you're right. We're in the honorable mention section. It is an omission that he was not in my top 3, but I think the other 3 have a valid case. He's going to be a starting tackle and possibly, most likely, the starting left tackle at this point, and that is a massive development. That he's going to be a redshirt freshman that is the odds-on starter now for the left tackle spot at Penn State. Yeah. That's massive for them. He's got to live up to that. I think there's still a little bit of an uneven, bumpy road ahead of him. I don't think he's going to come in and be a superstar completely. There's some things that he needs to work on for sure, as any offensive lineman does. But it's a great sign when your most talented player is also playing your most consistent among the guys competing for that role. So huge that he's there. And then I'll just rattle off the final 3 I have here, and you can wrap up with anybody else you have. Cam Smith was a standout that I heard a lot about. Brock Riker, another guy that I think, unfortunately for other people, is like solidifying that center role, I think, out of just how things played out. And then a guy who, in a similar situation of injuries and everything else and consistency, he was not there the whole time, but Yvan Kemajou is obviously their best pass rusher. Like, just the athleticism he showed, the fluidity, watching him in practice, he has gotten better. He has gotten quicker. I don't think he's gotten more explosive. I think if there's one area you would say he does not have some of the twitchiness of their elite pass rushers of the past, but dude is a composite great athlete. And he's going to be their number 1 fastball pass rusher off the edge this fall, as long as everything holds the way it is right now. So those are the other guys I have on my list.
Yeah, a couple I had on mine going to the other side of the ball. Ike Ozo, the defensive end transfer from Iowa State, continued to have a buzz build about him. this spring, partially I think because that defensive end room is still figuring itself out as we get out of spring ball and into the summer. You mentioned Brock Riker. We're going to talk about that center situation here in just a minute. But Armstrong Nadim and Keanu Williams, the two defensive tackle transfers, one from Oklahoma State, one from UCLA, both certainly made buzz and waves this spring. And then on the offensive side of the ball, you talk about the receivers, and obviously we heard a little bit about Robinson and Brookins, the Iowa State transfers this offseason. So those guys in that honorable mention category as well. Before we get to the stock down, take a quick break for an ad. So if you were at the blue-white game, T. Frank, I know you were there, sitting out in the rain. And if you were watching or listening to this and sitting out in the rain and thought to yourself, this poncho is not going to do it, this rain jacket I have is not going to do it, we now have something to tell you that you are going to want to listen to.
So I know we got the copy, but I'm gonna just railroad over that today. Yeah, I'll tell you the story. So it is my tradition to sit with Zoe out in the stands for the spring game. It's the one football game ever that we get to watch together in person. Yeah. And so I was wearing this bearskin over top of like a pullover like this, and it was 50 degrees, and it was a straight downpour for half of the practice, especially the very end. And the problem was I was not wearing anything waterproof from the waist down. I was just wearing a pair of jeans. I did not think that part through. So I get into the press room and I take this off. I am bone dry from the top of my head to my belt. And then the front of my pants, I stand up to leave, and there are water droplets running down my leg in between the space between my denim and my actual body. So like I was saturated all the way through my legs. This thing is legit. There is nothing that got through it. The only and I should say, because I don't want this to just be like a like we're paid to endorse sort of thing. I will give you one criticism. The only place that is not fully waterproof, and it was mostly waterproof, was this patch area. I put my wallet in here, and my wallet got a little bit wet, but not like fully soaked. Yeah. So this thing is real. And Greg, give him all the details about this stuff, but like I am a believer in these bearskin over rain jackets. They are awesome. They do the job.
Yeah, so we're talking about the Bearskin Heavy Storm rain jacket. Of course, you can see the rain jacket. Well, let me make sure I can see myself. Yeah, so the rain jacket outside, heavy zip inside. You can see more of that material here. They all zip together, goes together well, keeps you warm, keeps you dry. That's why the Bearskin Heavy Storm rain jacket packs into its own pocket. You can stash it in your truck, throw it in your bag, keep it in your glove box. It's always with you, weighs almost nothing. And the second the sky opens up, or on a day like Saturday where it just constantly opens up, you'll pull it out or you'll put it on before you get out of your car and you're covered. It's 20,000 mm waterproof. That's expedition grade, not a flimsy poncho, a real taped seam, sealed zipper rain jacket that handles sustained downpours, and it's completely PFAS free. No forever chemicals, which is more than most outdoor brands can say. Like T. Frank said, the part I like is that you can zip the rain jacket into the heavier jacket. So if it's cold out, and it was just a raw, damp day at Beaver Stadium on Saturday. But I'm looking more towards today. Yeah, I'm looking more towards today where I got to take the dogs to the groomer in the rain, and getting them out of the car is going to just require me to stand there and get soaked and beg them to get out. If you have pets that need to go places they don't want to go, you are familiar with that. So I will have my Bearskin Heavy Storm rain jacket on later today to do that. Right now, if you want to try one, wear one like we are. Bearskin is running 60% off on the Heavy Storm rain jacket with free shipping. All you got to do is text PEN, that's capital P, capital E, capital N, PEN, to 36912. That's PEN to 36912, and they'll send you a link to grab one at 60% off. Keep it in your truck, keep it in your bag, and next time it rains, you're the guy or girl who's ready. Text PEN, PENN, all capital letters, to 36912 today. Appreciate
and make sure
being part of it. Yes.
Make sure you use our promo code there, because I was talking to some people. I can't remember one of the regulars. I can't remember, and I apologize if it was Navy Blue over on the site, if it was Steven here on the YouTube channel. We were talking over on the site, And he said, like, after the game, I went and I ordered one from Baerskin because I needed it. And it was legit. Like, you guys sold me on it. I said, did you use the promo code? And he said, no, I didn't. And I just like threw my papers up meme. Like, what? Help us out. Because here's what happens is, like, we tell you about it. You go get it, but you don't use the promo code. They don't know we sent you, and then they don't renew with us. So just help a brother out. Make sure if you do use it, use the promo code.
Yes, you can do that by texting PENN, capital letters, all of them, PENN, PENN, to 36912 today. Thanks to Baerskin. T. Frank, let's get into the stock down portion of the conversation, and I would like to start it at the center position because I think we can expand more on this Brock Riker and Dom Ruli conversation here, kind of blend stock up and stock down together and move into this segment of the show. So I think you said it just a moment ago, but it is unfortunate for Dom Ruli that he was not available this spring because it does feel like Brock Riker has done a nice job putting himself in the best position possible to solidify himself as the starting center. Good news for Dom Ruli, of course, if you want to look at it from the other perspective, is that I'm assuming a good chunk of Brock Riker's work and almost all of the live work was not with Rocco Becht. So you have that going for you if you're Dom Ruli. And that obviously will be a part of the conversation come the fall. But I had Dom Ruli's stock just down a little bit, not necessarily, obviously not his fault. I'm sure he didn't go out and say, I want to, not be available for spring practice to compete with Brock Riker. But when you come out of spring ball with a guy who seemingly did a very nice job and is a part of the stock up conversation, there's usually a push and pull. There's not always a push and pull in these conversations, but it does feel like there's one here.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the guys that we're going to be talking about are from an injury perspective, kind of a stock down, and so like a lot of this is we didn't get to see a lot other than the blue-white game, and I don't think any of us want to overreact about like, ooh, that didn't look good, so we don't like that when it comes to the one practice in the rain. With Ruli, it is like the injury situation, and the problem was going to be for Ruli that Ruli is a good athlete. He's a good athlete, not just for a walk-on, but he's a good football player. He just has a limited size, right? So he looks like he's maxed out at around 300 pounds. Now, I think that they can get Brock Riker above that, but from that perspective, he's also an excellent athlete. So there's always going to be a certain point where Riker would pass Dom Ruli in terms of the intelligence and the athleticism and the execution. It was on Ruli to make sure that took as long as possible because he was executing at a high level and also showing his athleticism and kind of like making this competition, making Riker earn it. And so to not be out there, Riker got all that work, absorbed all of that, and is presumably still getting bigger. Like the coaching staff has been talking about how he's put on good weight this whole time. So it just felt like if there was an opportunity for Ruli to come in and compete and show them something, that they didn't have to immediately bypass him to go to the transfer. It was going to be during the spring, and like he could fight to be in the conversation in the fall. And just that didn't materialize because he got hurt. And so that's a huge bummer for him. And I don't know that there's anything at this point, like it's going to take a lot for him to get back into the competition is I guess where I'm going with this.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And certainly we know he will, and they will give him the chance to fight for that job, but it will not be easy, I don't think, to overcome the lead Brock Riker has given himself. As we know, though, Dom Ruli's a guy who's been with this program a long time, has certainly stepped up into any role they needed him to, and if somebody can do it, it could be him. But certainly unfortunate for him that the injury put him in the position that he finds himself coming out of spring practice. All right, let's get to number 3 on our list here. We're going to call that number 4, T. Frank, and we'll see if we can do this one better. I'm not sure if we're going to, but we're going to give it a shot. Number 3 coming up next.
Number 3.
All right, so let's start with a guy we both have on our list, Keith Jones Jr., the Grambling State wide receiver transfer who came to Penn State this offseason. He's not the biggest guy in the world joining this Penn State receivers room, but he's clearly a speedy guy. 6'4", 197 is what he's listed at a redshirt sophomore in Kashif Moore's receivers room.
Yeah.
I think he was a guy that was banged up a bit this spring, and we did not hear his name much at all because of that. And so it just continues to be not clear what role he could have, but he's going to be a guy I think we'll still keep an eye on if healthy for fall camp. But certainly he, like some others on this roster, I'm sure was hoping to make a move, especially it's tough when you miss a spring when the top two guys are limited. Everyone knows it. That means there's a lot of additional reps to go around, and it seems like Keith Jones got very few of them.
Yeah, and so like I'm going to pivot a little bit here because I do think that injury one, just to keep it away from being completely like injured guys didn't get a chance, so therefore they're stocked down. I would say that there was a competition among the top three receivers of who's going to be part of this conversation in the fall, and I'm not saying he's not, but I'm not saying he's the first guy, and so Karon Brookins to me is a guy whose stock is down just slightly because Koby Howard went up. And there is this binary here that we're talking about. They're playing different positions. So just to be clear, they're playing different positions, but all these guys kind of intermingle between XZ and F and or slot, whichever one you call it. So Brookins is a guy that long-term has a lot of talent. I think just it's going to take him a little bit longer to put it all together from a mental standpoint and kind of like get it to click. That's my biggest takeaway watching him in the 7-on-7. There were some moments where he had opportunities and he didn't use his frame or his size, didn't come back to the football. Not all of it was his fault, but it just felt like he was out there running his routes but not playing the game. So it felt like there's a lot of thinking going on watching him play. So I'm going to say slight stock down here for Karon Brookins as my receiver to go with Keith Jones Jr. for you on your side.
All right, let's get to number 2.
Number 2.
Yeah, I'm going to take the easy layup, low-hanging fruit, whatever you want to call it here, and put Penn State freshman quarterback Peyton Falzone on this list. They like what he did as a runner, obviously, but he came to Penn State, signed before Matt Campbell and co. got here as a quarterback. Obviously, Penn State wondered if he could be a tight end. The previous staff did. And so, they put him in a contact jersey for the blue-white practice, which is not – Matt Campbell, I think, gave a pretty – I don't know if diplomatic answer is the right word, but he answered it as best he could without saying we're not sure about the future for this player at the position he's currently at. And I think the non-contact jersey set it all for Peyton Falzone. So we'll see how that shakes out moving into the summer. Obviously, he wants to be a quarterback, and Penn State previously and now there's probably some question marks there. I just want to go find his quote quick from
So
Matt
let me
Campbell,
while you're doing that, let me just kind of discuss what he said and how it could work, because Alex Mansky is not available right now. And if they think like how long before he is available, if you wanted to build a quarterback run package around a football player and Mansky isn't available, who is a good runner and is physical and has size, you could do worse than throwing out your freshman quarterback out there to run a couple of plays.
And he can run. I'll give him that. He can run. Yeah.
Yes, and so he would be good at that. The question then becomes, like, are you burning his red shirt for that reason? And is that something he's going to agree to when burning his red shirt?
Well,
and
the
layer on top of that is – go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I hate to cut you off. I'm sorry, but let me stop you there for the important note that by the fall, that may not matter because we may have 5 for 5 in place where there are no red shirts and you get 5 years to play 5 seasons, and that's it. Which, if Penn State was doing this under the guise that that's going to pass, and thus they can use him in some special ways and not really care because there's no red shirts anymore, maybe it's not a stock down. So I do think, though, traditional quarterback stock down.
Yes.
But using him in but using him in ways that maybe accentuate his skill set. Matt Campbell did say that they put him in the contact jersey because he had some impressive moments in spring where he can run with the football and do some different things. So we'll see. Yeah,
and I don't want to completely dismiss that, and I also don't want to build
a
litigation case. Yeah, I don't want to build a litigation case and overplay it that this is something. But I could see them if that passes, but the problem is do you trust him to throw the football? Because then what you are saying is he's our goal line tailback.
Right.
And so, what's the difference between Peyton Falzone and Carson Hansen in those situations? And do you want to trust a freshman quarterback as opposed to the guy who has 600 or 800 carries throughout his career that you've seen? So, stock down for sure for Peyton Falzone.
You have anybody else on this list for number 2?
I'm going to go with Max Granville, another injury, and I think that this is a more than just, he was banged up. This is a consistent thing now, and so that is a stock down and a concern because we're talking about LeVar Arrington II, And like, can he be this hybrid drop guy? Can he be this guy that is juice off the edge? Can they build a package around him? And Max Granville can do all those things athletically. There's no reason he couldn't be that guy in this defense, but he just wasn't available. You know, we talked to him a couple weeks ago. He said, coming back from his injury, I was told that he was good to go for the offseason. Basically, he could have come back at the end of last year, but they decided to slow play it just because like there was no point. And so then he talked about, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, and I apologize if I'm misquoting this, but he had something that happened during the offseason, and then another thing with his back that happened recently that was holding him out of spring football, but wasn't preventing him from doing like some individual stuff. You know, like he was working on his own on the sideline. And I was surprised when we got our first view of spring practice back in the end of March, and he's over on the sideline working with the trainers. I was expecting him to be in the middle of it. Jeez, that was terrible. I was expecting him to be in the middle of everything. And so, like, they need defensive ends. They need pass rushers. They need guys that can do it. And he's on the sideline. And that's a problem because they're going to try and build stuff around players. And they think they know what they have in him, but they don't actually know because he hasn't been able to be out there. And so it is a frustration. It is an injury. You don't want to hold it against him, but 2 injuries now that have kept him out for last year and spring football this year.
Right, and that is a concern, and they will need him this fall, so he will need to be healthy by the time he gets to the point of the fall, the August, when summer camp is ready to start. 2 things from the chat before we get to our last stock down. As someone asked, anything on Brian Kordovich? I don't have him in either category. I'm sure he had a fine spring in a limited tight end room and got a lot of reps. Still think he's working toward carving out a role for himself in this program. Once Ben Brahmer obviously is good to go, and Andrew Appice, once he is back healthy, I think it'll be tougher to find reps this season, but we'll see. Keep Chopping says stock down for over half the team being injured. So it was a third, according to Matt Campbell. There were a lot of guys banged up, there's no doubt, but I just think we're in a different age in college football where you just get this stuff taken care of, and if it impacts some or all of your spring, it's what has to happen. And these seasons are longer than it's not everyone's season is longer than it's ever been, but in some ways they are. You're talking about getting done in January. If you wanted the surgery, if you're playing in a bowl game, and that, if you're playing in the college football playoff, obviously different than playing in the Pinstripe Bowl or the Pop-Tart Bowl, but you're looking at probably early January to get this stuff done, and then you're talking about maybe, if you're lucky, 8 weeks until spring ball starts, and where are you at with the rehab process by then? So I just think it's not as Penn State fans seem to be gravitating towards this injury thing and it being a bigger deal. And in my mind, I have not yet made it that.
Yeah. I also think there's an aspect of, how do I phrase this? Not everything 100% requires surgical intervention. But if you want to be at your absolute best, it is an option. And so you time it up to do it when it's best for the overall health of your career and the season. And so missing spring football is, I think, from a physical standpoint, if you're a smart football player and you can absorb information and you think you're going to be there for fall camp and you kind of feel confident about where you are on the roster, you can make a choice to be at your absolute best and get through winter workouts so that your body is physically progressing so you don't miss that really important time to put good weight back on your body after a season of having it pulled off of you through exercise and just wear and tear. And this is the opening for you to do it so you can come back and you still have fall camp. Like, there are some of these things that are intentional. I don't want to say like it was a choice, but the timing is intentional. And so it's not as bad as it may seem, even if it isn't perfectly ideal. Because, I mean, Greg, everyone would be healthy all the time, always, forever, if they could be, but that's not football and that's not life.
No, and Matt Campbell talked about that a good bit this spring as well. So we'll see how it all shakes out for Penn State. Obviously, I know that Iowa State was beat up a good bit last year, and that is a cause for pause to some degree, but sometimes you just don't, there's not much you can do about it. We saw that with Penn State to some degree last year as well. All right, let's get to number 1. Stock down for the Penn State football spring.
Number 1.
I'll let you lead off, T. Frank. Where you want to go?
Well, I want to go where you want to go because you put this on the roster, and I think it's right. It's everyone who isn't the top 3 defensive tackles because those guys seem to have Keanu Williams, Siali Tapaki, Armstrong Nadim have looked and seemed very good. But I think everybody else who is not in that group is still trying to find a role within the defense and within that defensive line room. And so I think it's good long term, but Liam Andrews moving from defensive tackle means he couldn't cut it as a true defensive tackle. And so now he's going to try and find a role within the team. And I think, again, long term, that can be great for him because he just wasn't going to be what they need at defensive tackle. But then you got a couple of other guys who maybe don't fit perfectly. And Ty Blanding is another one of those players that I think in the long run can find a role for himself in certain packages. But at 295, barely 300 pounds, he's not exactly what they want from this gap and a half defense. So he's going to have to find himself a situation where he's playing as a 5 technique or a 4-eye or whatever you want to call him, where he's playing slightly inside shade of a tackle. And that means he's not playing in the base defense a lot. And so that you put that on the rundown. I think that's exactly right.
Yeah, I just think also we didn't hear a lot about the Penn State defensive linemen who were at Penn State in 2025 during spring practice in 2026. We heard a good bit about Kemajou, obviously, but you get down this list of our Arrington, moving position, still raw, so anyone expecting that transition to be a slam dunk success immediately was overestimating how that was going to work, but we'll see if he can put the weight on. Deshaun Burnett, didn't hear a lot about him. Jackson Ford, a little bit of buzz for a freshman. I'm not sure if that buzz would have been the same if he was a second-year guy, but there's always interest in the freshman. Yep. Then you move to defensive tackle, Ty Blanding, not a lot about him. Caleb Brewer, not a lot about him. You mentioned Liam Andrews, DeAndre Cook. We did not hear a ton about him. So that group, they brought in all these older veteran transfers for a reason, right? So it's not, it's not as if any of this is a major surprise. But I believe that you look at this list, Dallas
Vakalahi.
Go ahead, T. Frank. Help me out.
Dallas Vakalahi.
Yeah, I don't think he was available much this spring. So there was some chance for guys to maybe step forward and get their name mentioned, and perhaps some did a little bit more than we are aware of. But at least from the outside looking in at this moment, it does not seem like any of the guys, for the most part, who were at Penn State last year along the defensive line have made such strides forward that they're going to have a bigger role for themselves this fall. We'll see. I think if anybody could, it's Ty Blanding, but time will tell on that front.
No, I agree. I think that's a good way to size it up, and we'll see what all that means long term, but in the medium term of this year, I think you're right about that for sure.
All right, we are coming down the home stretch of this edition of BWI Live, the final Wednesday one of April. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickel from BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. You can join us over there today for just $1 to check out the latest recruiting news. Ryan Snyder, while we've been on the air, posted a note on where Penn State coaches are headed to see various prospects during the spring evaluation period. That's ongoing, of course. It runs through the middle of May. So check us out over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. The guys will be back with recruiting talk tomorrow on the channel here as well. We're going to wrap up with...
Will they, though? Will they?
We shall see.
I also got a note during the show that Ryan's going to a Phillies game with you. And so he's not going to be available tomorrow because you guys got tickets to a 1 o'clock game. So it'll be me and Fitz tomorrow. Also, the video. If you're watching here, like the video, subscribe here to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Super helpful, especially now that we hit the off season and some people, I don't know why they would want to do other things with their life other than talk about Penn State football, but some people kind of like check out or they, go and do other things for a little bit. Like, just make sure you like the video. Help us keep the numbers up. Always super helpful. So thank you for that.
Yes, subscribe. We appreciate you for doing so. If you're on the podcast forum, don't forget you can do the same over there as well. NFL draft recap to close things out. Yes, very much so. NFL draft recap to close things out. Total of 8 Penn State players end up being selected in this year's 3-day selection process, 6 of which went on day 3. Vega Wani led things off, of course, going in round 1 back on Thursday night. Drew Allar was the lone day 2 selection on Friday, and then there was a number of guys who went before, during, and after the blue-white practice. So I don't know if you've had your fix yet of talking about Drew Allar's fit with the Steelers. If not, I'm going to open up the airwaves and let you run with that.
So the thing I don't love is that there isn't a starting quarterback for him to sit and learn. So there's a lot of pressure there for him to perform in year one. I also don't love their offensive line. I know they drafted a tackle in the first round, but it's a young offensive lineman. Jennings Dunker also comes in. So maybe there's parts and pieces long term that it could be good. But when you got, let's just say Allar is the starting quarterback because, he takes more ayahuasca and Aaron Rodgers realizes his happiness is somewhere off of the football field. Then Drew Allar and Will Howard are competing for starting snaps, and Will Howard to me is not an NFL quarterback. So, almost by de facto, Drew Allar becomes the logical conclusion of who's going to throw a ball down the field to DK Metcalf. It's Drew Allar behind an offensive line I don't trust, and we've seen his issues with pressure, not game pressure. I think he makes good plays when he's under pressure, but his accuracy does suffer. And so that is my concern. I like the pieces they have at the skill positions. So that's the one thing I do really like is I think that they've got, they can build a good running game. I think they got some more physical run blockers and they've got guys for him to throw to. You look at getting Michael Pittman. I think, did they draft a receiver as well? But obviously, the DK Metcalf is the most talented player.
I can tell you who they didn't draft. They didn't draft Lemon because the Eagles got him. But we'll leave that one alone for another day.
Yeah. So it's okay. It's not as bad once I looked at kind of the skill positions and things like that. But Mike McCarthy's offense is pretty outdated, pretty predictable. It has not had a lot of success outside of Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. And even then, Aaron Rodgers was just making stuff up by all the reporting of he would just change plays in the middle of the game. So that's all. The infrastructure around Allar I don't love. I know the Steelers get this great badge of honor for being so consistent, right? And having just 3 coaches since the dawn of time. But I don't really like their draft strategy over the last 7 or 8 years. I don't, since Roethlisberger retired, and I don't love this coach and his offense. The infrastructure I don't think is good. And so I don't see that that's a long-term successful position for a guy who has not been the most mentally resilient when it comes to putting the weight of everything on his shoulders and carrying the team, which is what the quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers is going to need to do. Point blank. I don't know that he's ready to do that as a rookie. And so that would be kind of where I think they might be. And I don't like that. So, little good, little bad, mostly bad.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers, of course, may be back, may not be back. I'm tired of reading about that. We'll cross that bridge when he makes a decision, if he ever makes a decision. If not, Drew Allar, Will Howard leading that quarterback room. I guess Mason Rudolph is on the way out. But yeah, so all right, that's the Drew Allar portion of things. Next up, your take on Zane Durant's fit with your Buffalo Bills.
So I'm still learning the defense. I have been looking at it as kind of one of these mixed front defenses where you are. They're bringing in Jim Leonard, who is, part of this coaching tree that Dan Lynn is part of. And so Dan Lynn's bringing a 4-down front here, and I think it's closer to a Mike McDonald role where they will have odd fronts, but they will predominantly be a 4-down front that uses blitzing and mixing things up, right? It sounds like the Bills are going to be using an odd front as their base. They keep talking about outside linebackers and nose tackles, even though, if it's 2nd and 7, they go to a 4-down front for pressure looks. So I don't know exactly where he fits in. Brandon Beane said he's going to be a 3-technique defensive tackle. So that is fine. He's going to be a disruptor, but if you think that he's going to be a pass rusher in the NFL, I don't think he's going to be that. My hope for him is that in base, if they are going to go with this 5-down front, they'll put him as a base 4-eye, and he can be a disruptor in one-on-one situations. His best skill is when you give him a one-on-one, you give him a zone concept, and he's got to beat a guy to the point whether he goes backside or front side on the zone, he will wreck the concept. You got to find a new point of attack because he took the original one away. He can do that as a rotational guy in the defense behind Ed Oliver. But long-term, I don't know that he's a starter. Long-term, I don't know how he exactly fits as a, kind of a growth piece in this defense because I don't know enough about the defense yet. It's still relatively, I think, being formed with what they have on the roster and trying to make it all work.
All right. I'll make a note. We can reconvene and talk about this in August during one of our pre-season shows.
Yeah.
You'll get a better feel for Zane Durant in that defense then. Nittany Brad asks, yeah, we can talk about that. How do you guys feel about where Nick Singleton and Karon Allar ended up? Tennessee looked excited to get him, and I believe Karon Allar will be the running back 1 in Washington. Obviously, both of those guys day 3 picks. I don't know quite enough about Singleton's fit with Tennessee. The thing I struggle with is that I'm an Eagles fan, so I follow the NFC East a lot closer than I do the AFC South. And so I don't have a great sense of that fit. Yeah. I love Karon in Washington. I think it's a great fit. I was, as an Eagles fan, immediately bummed when I saw they took him. And so I don't want to overstate day 3 selections, but running back is a position where, unlike some other spots, day 3, just getting picked at all means maybe a little bit more than elsewhere. So I do like that fit. Nick, I don't know if you have a take on him in Tennessee. I do not.
Yeah. So they got Tyjae Spears and Tony Pollard ahead of him. I think Tony Pollard is a good starting running back. He's a little bit older now. Brian Daboll's the offensive coordinator with Cam Ward, and I do see a future where if you want to do a bunch of read options and RPOs, and especially RPOs, with Nick Singleton in the backfield, like that is a lot of speed in the backfield between the quarterback and the running back, and a lot of ability to have the quarterback, do some different things. And Singleton the pressure might come off of Nick Singleton to be perfect if you give him some bulldozer lanes for him to run through. That might be what his future is, but it's not going to be ahead of Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears to start. The depth chart in Washington is much more favorable for Karon Allar, and he can fit in any scheme. So I have no concerns. I don't even look up who the OC is because I know that Karon can fit in that offense because he can fit in anything. He's going to be in part of a committee his whole career, and whether he's not going to be the lead back in terms of he's the number 1 guy, I think he's always going to be a part of a committee. But he's going to be a very valuable and productive part of that committee.
Very good. All right. Well, any final thoughts, T. Frank? I think that wraps things up for today. Any final thoughts?
I don't love where Zakee Wheatley went because I don't think he's a box safety. And the Panthers run a cover 3 heavy system where you have a deep free safety and a box safety. And Zakee's best skills are coverage instincts, zone abilities, which you can do, but he's going to be asked to play the run a lot. And I know he improved, but at the NFL level, I don't think, if you tell me that Kevin Winston and Jaquan Brisker and Zakee Wheatley are all playing the same position, I'm taking those other 2 over Wheatley for that job, which is going to be partly run defense. Wheatley can play as kind of a quasi-nickel over a bunch of linebacker or a bunch of tight ends. He can rotate into a deep half. I would be more comfortable if he were in a split field defense because I think that's where his skills really shine, of adding into the run game, not as a primary support run defender from underneath coverage. I'm concerned about that. I think he'll give the effort and he will tackle, but he will also lose some of those interactions. And then finally with Denai, they're running a multiple front, I think, with Jonathan Gannon coming over. So I think he has the opportunity to play opposite of Micah Parsons as an outside rusher and also play kind of a base defensive end, which really fits, I think, his skill set. He doesn't have to be a number 1 pass rusher, and he can rush from the inside or rush from the outside. So that's a good position for him. I think he can develop into a starter with the Packers, either in short term or long term, and there's not the pressure of him being the guy. I like that addition for the Packers and what he brings there.
Yeah, I don't think, just wrapping it up, that Drew Shelton's a bad fit in Dallas either. Not going to have the easiest path to the field, but an interesting place for him to land as well.
And he needed time. I think he needs time too, so that's a good thing for him.
Yep. No doubt. All right, that's Thomas Frank Carr, T. Frank. I'm Greg Pickel. We are wrapping things up for this edition of BWI Live. The recruiting show is back on Thursday here on the BWI YouTube channel, and then we'll be back continuing to cover Penn State football throughout the offseason as recruiting heats up, and we also get closer to the start of summer workouts, so stay tuned for that. For T. Frank, I'm Greg Pickel. We'll talk to you next time. Join us over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. There's the Bucket Side up today. Thanks a lot.